Chapter 33 Unbreakable. This is Anesthesia. And no, this is not a recording. I'm coming to you live, because I am alive, but you're not convinced. Of course you're not. Anyone can pull off a stunt like this using my memory construct and 100 other technological tricks. That's why I need you to dub this broadcast. Dub it enough to do everything you can to debunk it. Do your best to prove that it's fake, because once you fail, you'll have to accept that it's real, that I'm real. And once you're convinced that I am who I say I am, then we can get down to business. The first broadcast was short and sweet. It had all the conviction, all the confidence it needed to have, and with good reason. Anastasia had found something on the lunar disaster. Something big. She had done what no one else had managed to do. Uncover evidence that had been there, buried in the back brain since long before she was even born. The Thunderhead knew it was there, but it was, by law, obliged not to do anything about it. Scythe business was scythe business. It had to let it go. But the Thunderhead must know what she had discovered. It knew every bit of its own back brain. She wondered if it was happy with what she had found. "I am immensely proud of you," High-Bleeding Coleman told her. "I knew you'd crack it. Of course Makeda had her doubts." "I was voicing healthy skepticism," Makeda said in her own defense. "We could encounter chickens before they were hatched." "Or put our eggs in one basket," added Baba. "I wonder which expression came first, the chickens or the eggs?" Which of course made Tenka laugh. But his laughter was short-lived. There was something weighing on the High-Blade, on all of them. There had been an undercurrent of tension all day. It was even evident in Yuri, who usually played emotions close to the vest. "One of my crew had a family member gleaned," Yuri told her. "I need to go into town and console her." Yuri hesitated, as if there was more to be said, but didn't say it. "I'll be back late. Tell the High-Blade not to expect me for dinner." And then, when the rest of them did sit down for dinner, the tone in the room bordered thunder. Not tense, but heavy. As if the burden of the world, which rested firmly on their shoulders, had doubled. Anastasia thought she knew why. "It was my broadcast, wasn't it?" she asked, breaking the silence over a cell that wilted under the weight of everyone's mud. "People didn't react the way you wanted. It was a waste of our time." "Not at all," Makeda said. "You were marvelous, dear." "And," added Baba, "I've been tracking the chatter. It's through the roof. I'd say you'd made an even bigger splash than Endura did." "Poor taste, Baba," said Makeda. "Very poor taste." Tenkamen didn't comment. He seemed lost in his grins. "Then what is it?" Anastasia asked. "If something's wrong, you have to tell me what it is." "There was an incident last night," Tenkamen finally told her, "in North America." Anastasia braced herself. "Did it involve Rowan Demisk?" Tenka looked away, and so did Baba, but Scythe Makeda held glaring eye contact. "Yes, as a matter of fact, it did." Anastasia curled her toes so tightly she felt the soles of her feet begin to knot. "He was cleaned," Anastasia said. "Goddard cleaned him." Somehow, saying it herself was better than hearing any of them say it. But Tenka shook his head. "He was supposed to be cleaned," Tenka told her, "but he escaped." Anastasia folded with relief. It was not very Scythe-like. She tried to regain her composure, but everyone had seen. "He's with the Texans," Makeda said. "Why they'd save him is beyond me." "He's their enemy's enemy," Baba said. "The problem isn't that he escaped. It's what happened afterward," Tenka told her. "Goddard ordered a mass cleaning, beyond anything we've ever seen. Nearly 30,000 souls were taken, and he's ordered that those who escaped be hunted down along with their families. He's invoking the third commandment." "As if that applies," snapped Makeda. "When you've just condemned an entire stadium to death, who wouldn't run?" Anastasia was silent. She took it in. She tried not to respond, because it was just too big a thing to respond to. Rowan was safe, and because of it, thousands were dead. How was she supposed to feel about that? Your broadcast went out as it was happening, before we even heard, Tenka said. We thought it would overshadow you, but it was just the opposite. In light of this news, it makes everything you have to say all the more important. We want to speed up the schedule. Another broadcast tomorrow night. People need to hear from you, Anastasia, said Makeda. You're a voice of hope in the horror. Yes, of course, Anastasia told them. I'll do another broadcast as soon as possible. The main curse came. A rose so rare it was bloody. Such things shouldn't bother a Scythe, but today they all had to look away when the server carved. This is Scythe Anastasia. Have you debunked me yet? Have you done what my mentor, Scythe Marie Curie, the Grand Dame of Death, would have called your due diligence? Or are you willing to accept the assertions put forth by the various Scythedoms who support, overblade, Goddard's claims to larger and larger pieces of the world? Of course they say I'm an impostor. What else can they say, if they don't want to anger Goddard? Goddard, who invited tens of thousands to witness a gleaning that turned out to be their own. He claims that Scythe Fair sank Endura. It's a solid fact of history now. As I was there, I can tell you this much is true. Scythe Fair was an Endura. The eyewitnesses' accounts of survivors who saw him are legitimate, but did he sink Endura? Not a chance. In the coming days, I'll offer testimony that will make it very clear what happened on Endura, and who was responsible. In Goddard's glass chalet, there were surprisingly few things that could be broken. Ain watched as Goddard tried, but they simply lived in a world where everything was too well made. She was done trying to quell his temper. His undersides could be his wrangles now. Today it was Nietzsche. Constantine hadn't been seen for days. Supposedly, he was off meeting with representatives of the Lone Star region, trying to convince them to turn over Rowan, but they still denied that they even had him. Underside Franklin would have nothing to do with Goddard when he was like this. Tell me when he's human again, Aretha would say, and go off to her own quarters on a floor far enough away not to hear his rampage. His latest tantrum was brought on by Scythe Anastasia's second message to the world. I want her found, he demanded. I want her found and gleaned. She can be gleaned, Underside Nietzsche tried to explain. Whether you like it or not, she's still a Scythe. Then we'll find her and make herself glean, yelled Goddard. I'll make her suffering so great that she'll end her own life to stop it. Your Excellency, the suspicion that would bring upon you will not be worth the effort. It made Goddard throw a chair across the room. It didn't break. Ain sat calmly in the conference room, watching the drama play out between them. Nietzsche kept looking to her for help, but she would not waste her breath. Goddard would be unreasonable until he wasn't. Period. Then he would find a rational excuse for everything he had done while unhinged. Ain used to believe the things Goddard did were all part of a greater plan, but now she saw the truth. The plan always came after the action. He was brilliant at finding shapes in the clouds of his fury, such as convincing himself that the mile-high gleaning was a decisive act of wisdom. Repercussions from the mass gleaning had been immediate. Those regions that were anti-Goddard railed against him. Half a dozen regions announced that they would grant immunity to anyone who chose to leave Goddard's dominion, and plenty of people were taking them up on the invitation. Yet, in spite of all that, those who supported Goddard were also galvanized, insisting that those people at the stadium deserved gleaning, because anyone who would want to witness an execution deserved what they got, even though they were probably watching themselves before the feed was cut. Most people, however, didn't take a position either way. They just wanted to disappear into the pleasant race of their lives. As long as when bad things happened, they happened somewhere else, to someone they didn't know, it was not their problem. Except that everyone knew someone who was at the stadium that day and didn't come home. Nietzsche continued to try to soothe Goddard, who still stormed around the conference room. Anastasia is nothing, Your Excellency, Nietzsche said. But by reacting to her, you're making her much more important than she needs to be. So I should just ignore her and her accusations? Accusations are all they are, and we don't even yet know what she's accusing you of. She's needs best left and scratch it, Your Excellency. That actually made Ain laugh, because she could imagine Goddard scratching and itch until he bled out. Finally spent, Goddard slammed himself down into a chair and reined in his rage. "Tell me what's going on out there," he demanded. "Tell me what I need to know." Nietzsche sat down at the conference table. "Allied Scythoms are either supporting what you did at the stadium or are remaining silent. Scythoms who stand against you are calling for you to self-clean. But I'm more concerned with the flood of people crossing the border into the Lone Star region." "You wanted fear," Ain said. "No, you've got it. We're exploring the possibility of building a wall to stem the exodus." "Don't be ridiculous," Goddard said. "Only idiots build walls. Let them go, and once we succeed in absorbing the Lone Star region, those who abandoned Mid-America will be marked for gleaning." "Is that how you solve every problem now?" Ain asked. "Glean it away?" She expected him to snap back at her, but his mood had settled. "It's what we do, Ain. It's the tool we've been granted, the only tool we can wield." "And then," continued Nietzsche, "there's the matter of the Tonists." "Tonists?" lamented Goddard. "Why must Tonists always be on the agenda?" "You turn their prophet into martyr," Ain pointed out. "In spite of what you think, dead enemies are harder to fight than live ones." "Except," said Nietzsche, hesitating. "Except what?" Goddard prompted. "Except that we've been tracking reports that the toll has appeared to people." Goddard grunted in disgust. "Yes, I know, in clouds and in the patterns of burnt toast." "No, Your Excellency, I mean in the flesh, and we're beginning to think the reports might be credible." "You can't be serious." "Well, we never confirmed that the body presented was actually the toll's. It's possible that he's still alive." Ain took a deep breath, suspecting another round of things not breaking was about to begin. Chapter 34. A Better Place. "I know most people don't follow what happens in the Scythedom. That's natural. The Scythedom was created so that most people would never have to deal with the bringers of death until death was brought to them. But the sinking of Endura affected us all. It made the Thunderhead go silent and mark everyone unsavory. And without Grandslayers to moderate, it led to an imbalance of power within the Scythedom. We've had a stable world for over 200 years, but not anymore. If we want that stability back, we have to fight for it. Not just those of us in the Scythedom, but everyone. And when you hear what I have to say, you're going to want to fight." "I know what you're thinking. Is Scythe Anesthesia going to make the accusation? Is she going to publicly point the finger at Goddard as the killer of the Grandslayers and the destroyer of Endura? You'll have to wait, because there are other cases that must be made first. Other accusations. I'm going to show you a history of unthinkable acts that go against everything the Scythedom is supposed to stand for. It's a story that doesn't start with Goddard. In fact, it starts years before he was even born. In the year of the Lynx, the Nectaris Prime colony on the moon had what they called a catastrophic atmospheric failure. Their entire supply of oxygen, even the reserve of liquid oxygen, vanished into space, killing every colonist. Not a single survivor. Everyone knows about that. It's something we all learned in school. But have you ever read the first screen on the official history databases? You know the one, it's that annoying scroll of small print you always keep to get to whatever you're looking for. If you actually read it, buried in the middle of all that legal camouflage, is a small clause. It states that the public history databases are all subject to Scythe approval. Why? Because Scythes are allowed to do anything they want, even censor history. That wasn't a problem as long as Scythes were true to their calling. Honorable, virtuous, holding themselves to the highest human ideals. It only became a problem when certain Scythes began to serve themselves instead of humanity. The moon colony was the first attempt at off-world settlement. The plan was to steadily populate the lunar frontier and relieve the population problem back on Earth. The Thunderhead had it all worked out. Then came the disaster. I want you to learn everything you think you know about that event, because as I said, the official histories can't be trusted. Instead, I want you to research the lunar disaster for yourself, just the way I did. Go directly to the original sources, those first articles written, personal recordings made by the doomed colonists before they died, broadcasts pleading for help, It's all there in the Thunderhead's backbrain. Of course, the Thunderhead won't guide you, because you're unsavory, so you'll have to find it yourself. But you know what? Even if you weren't unsavory, the Thunderhead wouldn't guide you, because of the sensitive nature of the information. Helping you find it would be against the law, and as much as it might want to, the Thunderhead cannot break the law. Good thing you have me. The Lone Star's sights brought Rowan to Austin, the city farthest from any border, and set layer upon layer of protection around him. He was treated with care. He wasn't given a luxury suite, but wasn't put in a cell either. "You're a criminal," Scythe Coleman had told him during his rescue. "But we've learned from our studies of the mortal age, where crime was the norm rather than the exception, that criminals can be useful in their own way." They allowed him a computer with which to educate himself about the years he had missed, but he kept being drawn instead to videos of what had happened at Mile High Stadium after he had been rescued. There were no official recordings of the correctional clinic, as the North American Allied Scython was spinning it, but survivors were posting personal recordings they had made. Rowan watched them not because he wanted to, but because he felt an overwhelming need to witness as much of it as possible, to acknowledge as many victims as he could. Even though he knew none of them, he felt it was his responsibility to remember their faces and give them at least one last moment of respect. If he had known Goddard would do this, he would have resisted the Texan sights and accepted his own gleaning. But how could he have known? And how could he have resisted? Just as Goddard was determined to end him, the Texans were determined to steal him away. And he also watched and rewatched Citra's all too short broadcasts, knowing that she was still free and fighting made everything else bearable. The last time Rowan had been in the Lone Star region, he had been Rand's captive. The mandate of the region, benevolent lawlessness, made it easy for Rand to escape scrutiny and carry out her plan to bring Goddard back. But it was that same self-determination that made its sides bold enough to rescue Rowan. Post-mortal Texans were unique. They were beholden to no rules beyond those of their own personal making and accountable to no one but one another, sometimes to terrible results, other times to glorious ones. As one of the Thunderhead's 7 charter regions, it was a prolonged social experiment that had become a permanent way of life. Perhaps because the Thunderhead had decided the world needed one such place where people could learn how to live by the laws of their own hearts. Some other experiments didn't fare as well, such as the Pensive Collective in Roosevelt, the Charter region in Antarctica, where the Thunderhead introduced mind-like technology that allowed everyone to read everyone else's minds. Not pretty. People said it was the closest the Thunderhead had ever come to making a mistake, although it insisted that all its experiments, by their very nature, were successful, because they all proved something and gave it a better perspective from which to serve humanity. The Pensive Collective became the Slumber Collective, and now the people of the Roosevelt region were the happy subjects of communal dreaming, where minds were still linked, but only during REM sleep. 2 days after Rowan's rescue, Scythe, Travis, and Coleman visited him in his quarters. But then a third Scythe entered the room, one whom Rowan knew all too well, and was not keen on seeing. The instant he saw the red robe, Rowan knew he had been betrayed. He stood, reflexively reaching for a weapon. But of course he had known. Scythe Constantine, however, made no move to attack. He didn't seem too happy, but that was nothing new for the man. He only had 2 expressions, disgusted and judgmental. Scythe Coleman put up her hands to calm Rowan down. "It's not what you think," she told him. "He's not here to harm you. Scythe Constantine has joined the Lone Star Scythedom." Only now did Rowan notice that the jewels that had adorned Constantine's robe the last time Rowan had seen him were gone. And although his robe was still crimson, the fabric was now ragged canvas. While Scythes were free to align themselves with any region they chose, it was rare that an important Scythe like Constantine joined a different region. Rowan couldn't help but think it was a trick. Scythe Travis laughed. "Told you we should have warned him." "Believe me, Mr. Damisk," said Constantine, I am no more pleased to see you than you are to see me, but there are concerns greater than our mutual animosity. Rowan still wasn't sure if he believed it. He couldn't even imagine the high and mighty Constantine as a Lone Star Scythe, limiting himself to gleaning only by bowie knife, the only rule of the Lone Star Scythedom beyond the commandments. Please, Rowan, sit down, said Scythe Coleman. We have business to discuss. And when he sat, she gave Rowan a single page. On it were a list of names, all scythes. There were about 50 of them. Those are the scythes we have decided that you should end, Coleman said. Rowan looked up at Coleman, then down at the page, then up at Coleman again. Could they actually be asking him to kill 50 scythes? Travis, who was leaning against a wall with his arms crossed, gave a mournful, oh boy, sort of whistle. The look on his face says it all, don't it? This won't be easy. Rowan held the seat out to Coleman. No, Rowan said. Out of the question. But Scythe Coleman didn't take back the seat and was not about to take no for an answer. Don't forget that we rescued you from the prospect of a painful death, Rowan, she said. And because we rescued you, 30,000 innocent people were gleaned. You owe it to us as your rescuers, and you owe it to those poor people. All we're asking, added Travis, is that you rid the world of problematic scythes. Didn't you already have your heart set on doing that? Now you won't be working alone. You'll have the Lone Star Scythedom's backing. An official backing, added Coleman. Right, agreed Travis. No one can know. That's the deal. And exactly what makes a scythe problematic to you? Rowan asked. Coleman snapped the page away from him and pulled a name from the list. Scythe Kurosawa. He has spoken out against our region for years and has insulted our high blade time and time again. Rowan was incredulous. So that's it? You want me to end a scythe for having a big mouth? You're missing the point, said Travis. Why is this so hard for you, son? Through all of this, Constantine said nothing. He just stood back with a funereal expression. The fact was, aside of the fair, Rowan vetted his choices thoroughly. If he could find a single redeeming quality to the scythe in question, he left that scythe alone. He personally knew at least 3 of the scythes on that list. They might not have been the most upstanding of scythes, but they didn't deserve to be on it. Sorry, said Rowan. If you rescued me so you can use me to settle your grudges, then put me back on the pyre. Then he turned to Constantine. And you're a hypocrite. You condemned me for gleaning bad scythes, and now you're fine with me going out there to do it again? Constantine took a deep breath before he spoke. You forget that I was an under-scythe to Goddard. After what I've seen, I come to feel his hold on the world must be weakened by any means necessary. All the scythes on that list are of the New Order and full embrace Goddard and his philosophies. You began your rampage because you believed the scythedom needed a dramatic overhaul. A culling, if you will. Although I am loath to admit it, I believe you're right. Did Constantine actually just say that? Hell would be freezing over if the Thunderhead weren't controlling its weather. Thank you for saving my life, Rowan told Coleman and Travis. But like I said, I don't take requests. Told you so, Travis said to Coleman. Plan B? Coleman nodded. Rowan shuddered to think what Plan B was, but no one was pulling out their knives to cling him. In all the time since you were revived, did you ever once ask about what happened to your family? Scythe Coleman said. Rowan looked away. He had been afraid to ask, not just out of the fear of knowing, but also because he didn't want to bring his family into this, to be used on anyone's chessboard. If they're still alive, I'm sure they've disowned me, Rowan said. Maybe change their names, or even get themselves supplanted. If I were related to me, that's what I would do. Very insightful, said Scythe Coleman. Actually, 2 of your sisters did change their names, and 1 of your brothers did get supplanted, but the rest of the Damix family remained. Your mother, grandparents, and 4 other siblings. Are you threatening to hurt them? Travis guffawed at that. What do you think? We're like Goddard? We'd never hurt innocent people, except, of course, the ones we glean. I'll tell you what we did do, Scythe Coleman said. After using Endura, your family came to our region out of fear that they would be gleaned by Mid-American's new hybrid, with whom they knew you had bad blood. We took them in, and since then, they have been quietly under our protection, where they will remain, regardless of what you choose to do. Then she turned to Travis. Bring them in. Travis left the room, and Rowan began to panic. Was his family here? Is that what was happening? Were they going to force him to face them? No! How could he, after all that he had done, after all they believed he had done? As much as he wanted to see them, to see for himself that they were all right, he couldn't bear the thought of standing before his family. No, don't, Rowan insisted. If we can convince you, maybe they can, said Constantine. But the horror of making his family a part of this, of hearing his own mother tell him to go out there and kill Scythes, that was worse than being gleaned. It was worse than being burned alive. I'll do it, Rowan blurted. I'll do whatever you want. Just please, leave my family out of this. Coleman closed the door before Travis could return. I knew you'd say reason, she said, with a warm smile. Now, let's make this world a better place. Have you done the research? Have you dug into the back brain? I know it's frustrating without the Thundercat's help, but after 3 years, I'm sure a lot of you have figured out how to do it. There's a benefit to being unsavory, isn't there? It forces you to struggle through the frustration and do things the hard way, so much more satisfying. What did you find when you looked at the lunar disaster? Anything that didn't look quite right to you? Did you find that the environmental system had triple redundancy? Not only a backup system, but 2 backups to the backup. Did you learn that prior to that day, the Thunderhead had calculated the chances of an atmospheric catastrophe at 0.00093%? That's less than 1 chance in a million. Was the Thunderhead wrong? After the disaster, the Grand Slayers of that time enacted a week of mourning. No one would be gleaned for a week, since so many had died on the moon. I'm sure most of the Grand Slayers believed it was a tragic accident and were genuine in their remorse, but maybe, just maybe, one was not. If you're looking for evidence that would tie any specific side to that disaster, you won't find it. But did you look into what happened in the days and weeks after the tragedy? Did it trouble you that there was no cleanup of the site by the Thunderhead? No recovery of the dead? Nameless sources suggested it was simply too much effort for the Thunderhead to recover bodies that were too damaged by the vacuum of space and solar radiation to ever be revived. But if you dig in the back brain, you can find a single statement from the Thunderhead. It's there for anyone to see who cares to look. In fact, it's the last thing in its file on the lunar disaster. Have you found it yet? If not, I have it pulled up right here. Have a look. Lunar event beyond Thunderhead jurisdiction. Result of Scythe activity. Drawing out what she knew wasn't just a tactic to hook people. It was a stalling tactic as well, because Anastasia still wasn't sure where it was going to lead. But each day revealed more hidden truths in the backbrain. She knew she was close to a breakthrough on the Mars disaster, but was completely stymied by the destruction of the New Hope orbital colony. But the first reveal already had everyone reeling. Tengamenin was overjoyed and couldn't contain his glee at dinner. That statement by the Thunderhead in a forgotten file. Result of Scythe activity. Masterful work. You put us all the same, dear, said Makeda. We searched the backbrain for months and never found it. Walking people through how to find it themselves only makes your case stronger, Tenka said. But I can't lead them to things I can't find. There are still so many leads that make no sense, like the white silk. Explain, said Makeda. Maybe we can help. Anastasia pulled out her tablet and showed them an image. This was the last picture taken on the New Hope orbital colony before the disaster. You can see the approaching shuttle in the background. The one that lost control and hit the station, destroying it. Anastasia tapped on the screen. The backbrain links the image to tons of things, almost all of them relating to the disaster. News reports, obituaries, dynamic analysis of the explosion, and then there's this. She showed them an inventory log for a bolt of fabric. Pearl white silk. I tracked where it went. About half of it was sold for wedding dresses, some of it was used for drapes. But there are 15 meters unaccounted for. Nothing's ever unaccounted for in the Thunderhead's inventory.
Perhaps they were just scraps, Baba suggested.
Or,
came a voice from behind them.
perhaps it was used by someone who didn't need to pay for it.
It was Jerry, late as usual, but with the insight that made all the difference. There was only one sort of person who could walk away with an expensive fabric, no questions asked, and no have to pay for it. Jerry sat beside Anastasia, who quickly started working on the tablet. Once he had something to look for, the information wasn't hard to find.
There are hundreds of sites known to have ropes in shades of white, but only about 50 in silk, and pearl silk, that's not common at all.
Then she stopped to take in what her screen was telling her, and turned to the others.
There's only one scythe who had ropes made of that particular fabric,
she said.
Scythe Dante Alighieri.
While the others didn't realize the significance, Tenka did, and offered her the broadest of smiles.
How divine the comedy, he said. All roads lead to Alighieri. His name is familiar, said Makeda. Wasn't he from Byzantium? Transsiberia, I believe, said Baba.
Then the moment was shattered by a jarring jungle loud enough to make everyone jump. The sound ceased, then came again.
There's the culprit,
said Jerry, pointing to the antique 20th century telephone in the corner of the dining room. It was one of the old phones connected to Tenkamenin's personal line, which hadn't rung once since Anastasia had been there. It gave off one more abrasive jungle before Tenkamenin directed one of the servers to pick it up.
This is His Excellency's Highway Tenkamenin personal line,
the server said a bit awkwardly.
Who may I say is calling?
The server listened, looked alarmed for a moment, but then his expression resolved into annoyance. He hung up and tried to return to serving.
What was that all about?
Asked the High Blade.
Nothing, Your Excellency. It looked very much like something to me.
The server sighed.
It was a tonus, Your Excellency, moaning and groaning like an animal. I don't know how the miscreant came upon your number.
Then the phone rang again.
We could have it traced,
suggested Scythe Makeda. Tenkamenin's face was serious, not angry, but concerned.
There's a red button on the right of the device,
he told the server.
It will put the call on speaker. Be so kind as to answer it once more and press the button.
The servant did as he was instructed, and immediately a wordless wailing sounded from the phone's tiny speaker. The noise was so ghostly, it would have been more at home in a drafty medieval castle than the High Blade's palace. It was insistent, mournful, desperate. Tenkamenin pushed his chair back with a loud scrape, stood up, and went to the phone. He stood there, looking at it and listening to the awful sound. Then finally he disconnected the call.
Well,
said Scythe Baba,
that was unpleasant.
He tried to make a joke of it, but Tenkamenin was not in a joking mood. He just stood there staring at the silent phone. Then he turned to Jerry.
Captain Soberanis,
Tenkamenin said.
Where is your crew at this very moment?
Jerry looked around, understanding no more than anyone else the pertinence of the question.
They're either out in town or back on the ship. Why? Notify them that you'll be setting sail immediately, and that we will be coming with you. We, as in all of us.
Anastasia stood up. She had never seen Tenka like this. He had always been unflappable. Now he seemed deeply shaken.
What's going on, Your Excellency?
She asked.
That wasn't a random call,
he said.
I believe it was a warning, and one we should heed. How do you know? Because,
Tenkamenin said,
that was my father.